Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and thank you once again for joining me. I appreciate all the support and all the love. And today, in the building, in the actual building, I have a special guest with me. This is none other than my amazing husband, Jimmy Smith. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, in case you are wondering, no, he is not adopted, nor has he ever adopted. But I wanted to bring him on the show because he has an interesting insight. He and I were having a conversation, and I just told him an observation, which was the fact that I have noticed just in research and digging around, while we are out here, and when I say we, I do mean the African American community, speaking about adoption, Black people speaking about adoption, but there's not a lot of us speaking out about it. And I thought that was very interesting. I think that's very interesting. Then it led me to ask him, well, why do you think? I already know that adoption is very taboo in the Black community.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Y'all, I hope y'all ready. In the Black community. And so I asked Jimmy, I was telling him I thought that was interesting. And why did he think that was? And he began to give me an answer. And I was like, oh, stop. Because I think you should tell the people what you think about adoption in the Black community and also why it's so taboo. So put your seatbelts on, family.
I don't really think my opinion is unique, but from my perspective, I think that in the Black community, we mainly value what we create. Okay, and what I mean by that is, we value our own children. So man and woman come together, they have a child. That child is valued, right?
Okay.
And so beyond that, we don't think about bringing it outside because, just generally speaking, we don't value outside.
Explain.
So
What do you mean by that?
if you think about Black families in general, on average, tend to be close. Okay.
Okay.
And that is, generally the aunties or the brothers and the sisters, provided they had a great relationship growing up. As they get older, they also continue that great relationship, which then extends to their children, extends to the children beyond that, and so forth.
Okay.
Okay. But now that Black family across the street, right? There are some that will get very close to their neighbors, but most are going to say hi and keep it moving. And so we don't value those relationships outside of our naturally extended family.
Okay, but now, wait. When you say that the Black families are going to say hi and keep it moving, are you meaning now in 2023? Or do you mean
in general? Now, if you go back in the 60s, we had more of a community relationship, especially those built in the church. And for those that go to church, those relationships still exist.
Right.
But now those church people, to some extent, and all church relationships aren't as close as the building relationship, right? So we're great in the building, but how often do you call that person once you leave the building? Okay. Or how often you call that person once Wednesday night service is over? You know what I mean? So you're still valuing relationships in your circle, right?
Okay.
And you're not bringing in outside people. Okay. So that's one aspect to it. My second aspect is that, generally speaking, there's a cost, especially when you're talking about using agencies. there's a cost associated with adoption. Okay. And so, on average, the average Black family is typically not going to now go spend, I'll just say 5, 10,000. And it may not be 5, 10,000. It
It's
might be
more
20
than
or
that.
30,
It's more like
right?
30 to 40.
So if you're talking 30 or 40,000, how many of the average middle class families have $30,000 to be able to then go through this agency to get a child? Okay. And I understand. I watched the adoption podcast last week, and the adoption podcast, well, not last week, but a few weeks ago, and we heard Maria's story about foster care system.
Oh, okay. I was
But
going to ask you about
but
that.
let's be honest. How many Black families are going to go through the process of the foster care system? Not
Now,
that we
wait.
don't know it exists,
Right.
right? And so we know it exists. But if I can have 2 or 3 kids of my own, I'm not going to go to the foster care system to maybe get another kid or 2 kids on average,
Okay,
right?
but what about those that was in since you brought up Maria and Antonio, in their case, where they want to be parents and they cannot? Do you also think that most Black families are just going to be like, you know what, if I can't do this naturally, then I'm not doing it? Is
On
that what you're
average,
saying?
yes, because again, we don't value. I don't know where that kid came from. I don't know what situation that
Okay.
kid was born into. You
Okay.
see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And so yes, generally speaking, we're not going to bring in these, and forgive me for saying random kid, but yes, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a random kid who you don't know where they came from, and you don't know what they've been through, and now you're going to bring them in your home. Okay, that's the foster care system, right? And
It
so,
is.
um,
Even a baby?
if a baby is obviously a little bit different,
Right.
you know what I mean? But again, in order to get into the system, as she described, and I don't know if the process is the same, but there was a 13-week course that they had to attend, she said,
Right.
for 13 weeks in a row,
Right.
right? Number one, you have to first have the heart to want to bring in an outside kid. Okay, that's number one. Okay, and that's not something that naturally everybody's thinking about.
Okay.
Okay, so you got to have that heart first. So that's stage one. So let's say you had the heart, then you go find out what the process is, and then you find out. Now in her case, she said they allowed them to basically pick and choose. I don't know the process, so I don't know if the situation is always where you're able to pick and choose.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say there isn't necessarily a pick and choose process. Maybe they say, well, you're going to have to take where you get to take us or what we give you. Or they say, well, you could turn down 2, but by the time you get to 3, now you got to take the third one. Yeah, I don't know what the situation is. But when you start putting those kinds of stipulations on people,
Okay.
people who are already, let's say, open, but weary, it reduces the chances that that person is actually going to follow through. You know what I'm saying? And so, and then let's go to the elephant in the room. Okay? And here's the elephant. We're talking about Black families. 70% of all kids in the Black community are born to single mothers.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not the single mother typically isn't going into the adoption system, right? Because they probably don't want to send a kid to a mother who has 1, 2, 3 kids already by herself. They're not going to give her a 4.
You think it's 70?
The numbers are 70%.
That's kind of
Google it. You got a
no.
computer in front of us. All you got to do is Google it. So when you consider those things, the number of Black families we have today, well, sure, they're probably, by comparison, I said they're probably about, maybe they're about the same as they were 50 years ago, but 70% of our kids are being born to single mothers. So that too also has an effect on where these Black families.
Okay. So, in all of that, another thing that when we were talking about this, you kind of went into your what you think about the Black family since you're talking about the Black family. So I think we've already established as far uh, as you're concerned, most Black families. Did I say it right?
Okay.
Black.
Good.
Most Black families probably don't want to adopt. Is that fair?
I would say most don't want to. Yeah.
And most Black families also do not want to um, go about uh, do foster parenting. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And because of this, and you're telling me that this is why, or some of the reason why, because we don't value anything outside, is some of the reason why the topic of adoption is so taboo in the Black community. And it seems like it always has been. My take on it is that back in the day, let's say the 50s, 60s, 70s, especially when adoption became extremely popular because it was, if you were too young, if you were a single mom, it was, you were, for the most part, a lot of them were coerced into, okay, because it was valued that a child should come be raised in a two-parent home. Now, we do know over time, what would you say about that value system? About
Being raised in a two-parent home?
yes, because now I know it's changed, but we're not being coerced so much to give our children up because we're single parents like they were back in the, I'm going to say more the 60s and the 70s was when it was really going on.
So
Put your seatbelts
I don't know how you put a seatbelt on. So I'm not understanding the question. So the question,
on. The question is,
do I think that we have the same value on family as we did 50 years ago?
yes.
Well, I don't think we have the same value that we had on family as we did 50 years ago.
And let me tell you why I'm asking. Because if the values are different, it's interesting because back then our values were one thing and they pushed you to put your child up for adoption if you didn't have that that family nucleus the way they thought you should. Now you see that a whole lot more. I didn't get a chance to finish Googling yet, but 70% you said are single families, but they're not being coerced to do this like they were then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that taboo around adoption is still there. Like so tell me what you think about the Black family from then to now.
Well, I think
Don't hit the table.
50, 60 years ago, um, we're talking about a family. We're talking about valuing family, right?
Right.
So mothers, fathers, having being together was more important than anything, right?
Okay.
And what I mean by that is what those parents were going through personally had no bearing on how they felt about the family, right? So even though, let's say dad had a known side piece, dad had a known second family, right? The the uh the family unit as a whole still was kept together. Okay? The family wasn't broken apart because of situations that mom and dad were going through. Now, personally, did they probably have some battles with each other? I'm sure they did. But did they always just separate because the battle happened? They did not, on average, right? That's why granddaddy will die, and then this whole other kids come to the funeral, and everybody like, who are they? And then they be like, oh, he had some kids on the side. You know what I'm saying? So, but grandma and grandpa were still together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So today, we don't do that today. And today, because of the sexual revolution, right? Having sex It's like, yeah, I had sex with that dude. Oh, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Or vice versa. The same thing for the man. Oh, yeah, I had sex with her. You know what I'm saying? And so there's no value on sex except for pleasure. And so sex is based on pleasure. The results of sex are irrelevant now. Okay? So yeah, I had my pleasure with this person, and oh yeah, we got pregnant. But I still don't like them. You know what I'm saying? And that's how we treat relationships today.
But I think it's
So
interesting.
we don't value relationships in the same way until here's when it changes for most people. It changes when you find somebody that you want to value a relationship with. So everybody prior to that, whatever. But then you meet that one person, which might be one kid in, it might be two kids in, might be three kids in, might be four kids in sometimes, it could be five, for some people. But until you meet this one person,
okay,
every other sexual relationship was just that. It was sex. And so from that perspective, right? Now, 50 years ago, did they treat sex that way? I would argue there's probably a lot of people who did. But there was still a higher value on it than we carry today. Because today, even when you talk about relationships, right? People will tell you there's a certain set of qualifications that make you eligible to be a husband, which very little have to do with character.
okay. So we don't value, and I'm paraphrasing here. So we don't value our family, the Black family, the way that we did. But it's still real interesting to me that the values are different. We look at sex differently, all of that, but we still tend to not want to talk about this adoption thing. We still tend to not want to, maybe, I guess, as far as you're concerned, participate in this. And I guess I'll take it in this direction. Why don't we want to talk about it? Why are we so secretive? What are we?
Well, that
What are we
goes
afraid
back
of?
to the idea that, again, the traditional concept was what happens in the house stays in the house.
Okay.
So if what happens in the house stays in the house, then you don't talk about anything outside of the house. And so that now extends within families, right? So in the family, here's what they used to do in terms of adoption back in the day. So I tend to think in some cases it wasn't truly adoption. It was just you got the baby,
You're
you
right.
were 13, okay? You ain't gonna raise that baby. Auntie Sheila said she'll take that baby.
Right. You
So
hear that, Auntie Sheila?
so Auntie Sheila took that baby, and Auntie Sheila raised that baby as her own. And maybe when you was 19, 20, 30, they finally told you, Auntie Sheila ain't your mama. so now the whole time, of course, everybody else is talking about that ain't Sheila baby, right? And so that's how we dealt with it, right? So it goes back to what I originally said. We don't do outside.
Mm. Okay.
We do family.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, that's the secret, but it was the secret in the family. The family knew that baby wasn't Sheila's. You know what I'm saying? But they acted like it was, right? Ain't nobody ever saying nothing to the baby. They ain't want the baby to know, right? And then, at some point, whatever, it all comes out. But it stayed inside. We don't do outside as much as, let's say, other people. And that may not necessarily be true. We might do outside as much as other people. But because, again, you don't, and again, it even goes back to that concept, right? We were raised with this concept, you don't tell white people what you do. You know what I'm saying? That was the concept. You don't tell them, what you tell them? What? We didn't do that. These are all of these things that they do in the. Would you apologize?
I just wasn't ready. You gotta tell me when you finna make a sharp left turn. I wasn't
Left
ready.
turn is the truth.
I'm here.
We're just talking about the truth.
I'm here.
If we don't want to do truth,
no, we gonna do truth. We gonna do truth. That's why.
Truth.
That's why you're here.
The truth is, we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about quote unquote family business outside of the family.
Okay, so what about? Okay, so what you just said, I understand, and that's when the baby stays in the family. But what about a situation like mine, when the baby goes away, and then the baby comes back, and clearly it's a known fact because the baby came back. But in some circumstances, in a lot of adoptee stories, people still want to pretend like it didn't happen. What do you say to that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
It's the same concept, right? So, I was about to get personal. I don't know how personal you want to get, but it doesn't change, right? So, it doesn't change. It's the same. It's the same concept, right? So you're going to get two situations in those scenarios, right? So the first situation is, and even in your situation, if you were old enough to recognize what was going on, you knew what happened, right? And everybody in that generation that was old enough to see, yes, she had a baby, that baby no longer is here. Right. So those people who are old enough to recognize that baby left. Right. And so those people, while it may not have been a concern for them, because again, what happened. So we ain't gonna talk about that no more. Which they did. Because if you weren't around to see it, you didn't know.
That's right.
So they had resolved to not talk about that again. Right.
That's a whole nother conversation.
And even as you have found out in your initial investigation, right? They called, they said,
hard no.
We ain't doing that.
I got a hard no.
We ain't going back down that situation, right? And then so when you talk about your situation, which yes, your situation turned out to be beautiful, but you didn't go to the people who knew about it. You had to go to the layer underneath.
But here's the thing though. Yes, I ended up finding the layer underneath, but I didn't know until I found the layer underneath that even he didn't know.
But that's not the point. The point is, it's when you talk about the gatekeepers who know were very, generally speaking, and this may not be true for everybody who was a gatekeeper, but generally speaking, the gatekeepers were fine with keeping the gates closed. Right?
That's fair.
And so from that perspective, what I'm saying is it was the layer underneath, the ones that did not know, that were now like, wow, this is curious. This is interesting. Let me find out. Right? And then now, truth be told, the gatekeepers, they were forced into a situation. Because you're already building this thing with the layers underneath.
Okay.
And the layers underneath are the ones that said you need to come. And then now everybody else is like, what are they gonna do? They're either gonna have to fold, right? Or they're gonna have to look crazy. And so again, this is generally speaking, right? I'm not saying that's what happened. You know what I mean? Maybe they had changed their mind by then too. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why they were open arms. But that's generally speaking, that's what happening, right? And so it goes back to what I said. We like to keep our family business. Okay. You know what I'm saying? And so because of that, there's a layer of, if I can't have my own, I'm not going to just bring in somebody outside. Because I don't know if the outside is going to understand how to protect family business. Let's be truthful to this thing. You know what I'm saying? That's why, can we go layer deep? That's why we're so weary of these interracial, why we tend to be leery of interracial relationships.
2 seatbelts, family. Put on
because
2 seatbelts.
You're bringing outside people in.
Wow.
You letting these people into what we do.
Is that what it is?
Who we are.
Is that what it is?
Just saying. Again, I'm not saying this is, now personally.
Explain that. Stop. Go there. Explain that.
Go where?
People are like, you're bringing this person into the, because we don't, what you just said. Explain that. I think you need to explain that to the people because you got some people looking at you with cross-eyed right now.
I'm not talking about me. I don't care.
He doesn't.
I don't care. I told all my boys.
He did.
You know what I'm saying? Date out your side your race. You know what I'm saying? I told them to do that. Quite frankly. So I'm not talking about my opinion, but we just talking about black people. Okay, that's what we're talking about.
But still explain that to the black people.
What is there to explain? Black people understand that this is the case?
Do y'all? Drop it in the comments if y'all understand. Please drop in the comments if you understand.
I mean, at the foundation of it, right? There's no difference then. If we're just talking about people, there's no difference in people.
Okay.
What a white woman, a Spanish woman, I'm talking because I'm a man. That's what. So there's no difference in any of these women, from a biological standpoint.
Okay.
They're all the same, right? So what makes them different? What makes them different is that they come from, to me, when, I'm on this whole new thing where American culture is American culture, regardless of what race you are. We're not going to go there.
We are not. We are not.
So, so from that perspective, from my perspective, they all come from the same culture. Okay? Generally speaking. Okay? So the only thing that's different is that foundationally, there's some things that Black people have gone through historically.
All right.
In this country that other races have not. And so there's a perspective that we have or that we carry historically, other races do not. Okay. And so when we say we're bringing outside in, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about you're bringing, especially when you're talking about white people, because we have this wall up in that, there's still a lot of us that have carry a veil of skepticism when it comes to white people. And so, especially when you're talking about white people, generally, just talking general, okay? There's some of us who have elevated beyond this sort of thinking. There's some of us who have the thinking but don't express it. But generally speaking, that was that fear, especially when we're talking 50 years ago.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like that's more with the older generation. I don't feel like that's necessarily now.
It is now. It is now too, though. It is now on. It changes when you get into individual people's lives. Okay.
Explain that.
But when you talk about the underlying sense, generally it's still there. Hence the reason why when we talk about politics, what are we talking about? We talk about politics in terms of what? Black people and white people.
Okay, we're not going there either.
I'm not trying to say that we're going there, but you said
Black Caucus, and you know who I'm talking to.
I'm not saying that, but we don't have to go there. But when you talk about the general sense of how we think about this country is still discussed in black and white.
Okay,
right. As soon as the election comes around,
I'm reeling you in.
We discuss the country in black and white.
Okay, I'm reeling them in. That's okay.
That's the truth.
I'm reeling him in. Okay, and we're back, and we are back. We're not doing any of that on this podcast. So I appreciate. No, I'm reeling him in, family. Don't worry. You can take your seatbelts off. I cannot.
Where's the lie?
No.
Where's the lie?
Family. Okay, so I do appreciate your opinion about the Black family. I think your opinion is very, very interesting. So basically, we want our own. If I had to summarize everything that you say,
at the end of the day, I think Black people are looking to have their own because, and again, even when you go, let's take it even further back, right? Traditionally, when a slave had a child, that slave did not belong to the child. The slave was responsible for raising the child, but the child ultimately belonged to the master. Did he not? Okay. And so the master, if he could get, you know what I'm saying, some good money from this kid, you know what I'm saying, because he was a kid, you know, because he was a male or or maybe a young female, and ready to have more babies.
Okay.
Right? It was the master's decision ultimately to be able to decide if that baby stayed or go.
Okay.
Right? Right? The mother, the father had no bearing on that.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So now we bring that 300 years later, right? If I have this kid, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to hold on to my kid. I'm not trying to let anybody else raise my kid, right? And so adoption means I got to bring in somebody else's kid. Somebody else's kid, I don't know. Which is why, again,
I don't know that there's going to be a lot of people. I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that there's going to be a lot of people that would necessarily think like that. Not today. That's my opinion. I understand the sentiment,
right?
And I understand the sentiment.
But even today, let's say the average 35-year-old. No, let's say 30-year-old.
Drop in the comments. Please drop in the comments if you disagree, if you agree. Let us know. Let him know.
Okay. The average 30-year-old today, right? I'm 30 years old. I'm married, right? So I'm married, and we're struggling to have kids. Okay? We're struggling to have kids, whether it's because of issues with my husband or whether it's because of issues with myself. Okay? I'm betting, and we're talking about Black families, right? I'm betting that maybe 50% of those families are thinking adoption. Maybe.
Let me know, family.
And I think that's high.
Let us know.
I think that's high. I'm giving that, but I think it's high. I'm thinking most of those people are struggling through the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 years, maybe, right? Depending on what their circumstances are, right? Because, right, if I can't afford in vitro, then that's not an option.
Which is also very expensive.
That's not an option. Okay. So then I'm back to trying to, I don't know, let's say it's a fibroid issue. I'm back to trying to manage my fibroids and get those under control so that I can be able to have a baby or whatever the case may be, right? And that might be, again, a 2, a 3, a 4, or 5 year process.
Okay.
Right? But what am I doing? I'm working through that process.
You've not thought about adoption, is that what you're
saying?
Right?
Because to me, if I wanted to adopt, right? If adoption was my first if my backup plan, let's say that, right? I could have been on my backup plan in year 1.
Okay.
Because let's say you go down the foster care system, 13 weeks, right? 13 weeks, that's 3 months.
Okay.
Right? So in 3 months, again, just because I take in an adopted child doesn't mean I can't still try to have my own. Sure. It doesn't stop me from doing that.
Okay.
But what am I focused on? I'm focused on my what? My own.
My own.
Right?
That's interesting.
And then I'm looking at adoption or foster care or whatever. I'm looking at that as my faraway backup plan. If I'm even thinking about that. 9 times out of 10, I'm simply focused on how do I get my own? Because we're more interested in getting our own than we are. And then for those who get their own, let's be honest, there's very few far between that once they get day 1, day 2, day 3, whatever they physically have with their spouses or whatever case may be, who are now thinking, let's go get a 4th from outside. Most of them are thinking, man, I can't wait to get rid of these things.
Long go and get
some more. Like, you want me to do this again?
Oh God.
So I'm just saying, when that's what we're talking about.
I understand,
and it's not really. I think there's some underlying issues, like I've expressed, right? But it's not. I don't necessarily know. I don't want to come across as being malice or anything towards adoption, because I don't think it's a malice thing, right? It's not. Well, you want adoption? Oh my gosh! I don't think it's that. But if, again, I'm trying to have my own, and I'm very focused on having my own, and again, for those who even consider it, it's usually the second option. It's usually not the first.
I do know of a couple of stories where And like you said, it's probably not very common, but a couple of stories where it was the first option simply because the woman just did not want to go through what we go through being pregnant. You do have those out there, and I acknowledge that. But I do agree with you, that's probably a very low number
It's a low,
of
you know.
females that think like that.
And then too, you got to here's the other thing. Again, there's a cost associated with all of this, because let's say you go through the foster care system, and for all intents and purposes, you got this baby for free. Okay.
Ooh.
You go, it's a cost. You go to the adoption agency. I'm just saying. So now there's still a financial component, because you still have to be financially secure to be able to take care of, let's say you already had one child of your own, and then you brought in a second child in adoption. Now you got to be able to afford to be able to take care of two kids.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And so, or let's say you want to bring in a whole bunch of foster kids, right?
And some
You're
people
not
do
even,
that.
and some people do that. You're not, but not only that, but you need to be able to house all of those kids.
Yeah, this is true.
You know what I'm saying? And Black families, generally speaking, if they can afford it, they're putting their kids one to a room. They're not putting 2, 3, 4, 5 kids to a room. And if they do have to do that initially, they're typically working to try their best to separate the kids.
Okay.
So now we're talking about financially. Can I do that per kid?
Okay. And that, okay.
There's a whole lot of financial implications. And I'm not saying that white families, generally speaking, have.
No, we're not. We're just speaking
more
about
to be able to do that.
Black families today.
I'm just saying, there's a whole lot of underlying challenges to this thing.
We might bring him back to talk about. We won't bring him back to talk about that. We won't. I thought about what I said. We won't do that at all. So I'm gonna wrap up while I still have some followers, and people still love me. I'm joking, family. I'm joking. I brought him on because I understand he had an opinion, and it's just that. It's his opinion. And what I always aim to do with my podcast is to give you something to think about, some insight. And even if you disagree, and that is totally okay.
Please do.
Please drop it in the comments, and I will make sure to bring him back so you can address Jimmy Smith. Okay? Do you have any parting words, sir?
I'm good.
You're good? You got it?
I answered all your questions.
Answer my questions?
If you're happy, I'm happy.
All right. Well, all joking aside, I appreciate you coming on to the Adoption Journey podcast. And look out for him. That's all I'll say. Just look out for him. He's got some things in the works. So look out for Jimmy Smith. You want to go ahead and shout out your business? Please do.
Oh, Bo's Boys Barbecue?
Go ahead.
Oh, if you like barbecue, check out Bo's Boys Barbecue. It's on all social media platforms. Bo's Boys Barbecue. BOSBOYS Check us out, man.
And if you are in the Orlando area, they're located in Winter Garden every Saturday from 12 to about 5 or until sellout. The address is 133 Avalon Road, Winter Garden, Florida, 34787. That's right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining yet another episode of the Adoption Journey podcast. I am, again, your host, Tarsha Smith. This is my husband, Jimmy Smith. And until next time, bye, family.
Bye-bye.